Now it's green. Oh, I hear it. All right, perfect. So I'm going to follow Susan's lead by asking the next speaker to please come up at the beginning of the Q&A session for the previous speaker. We will have 15-minute talks and then 3 minutes for questions, so have your hands ready early for those questions. Our first speaker today is Linda Lee. She's going to be talking to us about a usability evaluation of Tor Launcher. That's work that's collaborative with David Fifield, Nathan Malkin, Ganesh Iyer, Serge Egelman, and David Wagner. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you. Is this close enough? All right. Hi, my name is Linda, and I'm here to tell you that Tor is awesome at circumventing censorship, but users in those censorship environments have a hard time using those awesome censorship circumvention technologies. My work evaluates Tor Launcher, which is a user interface that users use to configure the Tor network settings for Tor browser. Now, this is the first user study to evaluate Tor Launcher, and thus also the first study to study Tor as a censorship tool instead of an anonymity tool. What we did by evaluating Tor Launcher was essentially to see how difficult it was to use this to connect to Tor in various censorship environments. Tor has multiple cool things that you can use to circumvent censorship and circumvent censors trying to censor Tor as well. One of these things are called bridges. They're unlisted relays into the Tor network, and if censors block the Tor relays, you can use one of these to get around that. Another thing that Tor provides are these things called transports, which are obfuscation protocols, so that if censors try to block Tor by looking at the traffic and seeing what Tor traffic looks like, you can make your traffic look like random noise or HTTP traffic. It's important to note that not all users use Tor to circumvent censorship, and I am evaluating Tor Launcher and how easy it is to use if you're circumventing censorship, but other people who have to use it for anonymity will have to use this as well. So having this be a usable Tor launcher will not only help people who are using anonymity connect to Tor faster, but also help the people who are trying to use Tor as a censorship circumvention tool be able to access the internet as well. The spirit of this idea was to get a bunch of people in a room, put them behind some censorship, and see if they could connect to Tor. We did this, but a bit more formally. What we did first was to run a qualitative study that observed users, and we tried to understand why they were doing the things they were doing and why they were confused. We used this feedback to make some design changes to the interface, and then we quantified how long and how many people could connect to Tor in various censorship environments, and if our design changes made any difference. Now you might be asking, how did I get people to use Tor in all these censorship environments? We actually simulated censorship environments. We did this for the reproducibility and stability of the experiment because those environments change all the time. And these environments were designed so that people have to take different user paths in the interface. So we required users to select bridges or select specific transports without necessarily replicating the censorship environment exactly. We have 3 types of environments, E1, E2, E3. E1 is a censor that doesn't want you to get to Facebook, so they block that. E2 blocks Facebook and blocks Tor, and E3 is an advanced censor that blocks Facebook, blocks the Tor relays, and tries to block Tor in all sorts of other ways by looking at our source code and trying to block everything that we put in there. You might be saying, why did you simulate E3? What kind of people need to even do that? Okay. Okay, sorry. The good thing is that only one country has been able to block Tor so thoroughly. The bad news is that it's China, so this is actually a pretty representative use case to study. So if you are using Tor in E1, you just need to make a direct connection to Tor. If you are in a censorship environment that blocks Tor, you need to configure your network settings, say that you want a bridge if you know what that is, choose a bridge, any one of them will work, although you probably don't know that, and click connect. If you are in one of those fancy advanced environments, you need to click one of these 3 things, none of the other things will work, and you're supposed to figure that out somehow. You're also trying to ignore this thing, which doesn't actually have to do with circumventing censorship. Okay, I'm so... I'll just put it on myself right here. So when
These things are not made for women's clothes.
Yeah, is this better for you guys? All right, let me know if this is good. All right. The first thing we did was to recruit 16 participants for a small qualitative study. The objective of this study was not to get a representative average opinion of the interface, but to see many different types of people and how they were able to connect. So that 62-year-old grandma who couldn't use the internet was there, and we got her because if she could use it, then it was probably a good sign. We also had a CS PhD student, so that if he couldn't do it, we kind of knew it was a bad sign. We put the users behind a censorship environment, told them that they were being censored, showed them a blocked and not blocked website, told them we downloaded Tor on their machine, and told them to use Tor to get to that blocked website. We then left them alone for 40 minutes and interviewed them about their experience afterward. We did this 16 times, and here's what we found. We found out that users are actually pretty good at following directions, and I don't necessarily think that people who click connect because they thought it would work is broken because the interface tells them to do so. And a lot of people also pick the recommended bridge. But a lot of people were confused when they followed the directions and the directions didn't work and there were no further directions to help them along. The second thing we found out was that users don't have a mental model for censorship circumvention. They don't know what that is, and they don't know what any of those means, and they don't know what that means at all either. So I don't think it's actually fair to ask users to know Tor-specific concepts on first use. So we should work on a way to make this process easier for them. The third thing we found out was that users got distracted trying to configure these proxy settings because after they followed all these directions, they had nothing else to do and they figured, well, that was right, so this must be the thing that we're missing. With this feedback, we designed some design changes. For the full list, you can refer to our paper, but we tried to address the issues that we found in our qualitative study. The first thing we did was to give more tailored directions. For instance, we told people that if they're in a censored environment, that they should probably configure their network settings. We also eliminated the need for any previous Tor-specific technical knowledge, like the fact that only the meek transports work in very censored environments. And we gave them a secondary recommendation to try that after the recommended one didn't work. The reason why we didn't recommend this as the default one is that they're just very costly to run, and Tor would not necessarily recommend that for every user. The third thing we did was to hide infrequently used settings, like the proxy settings. We just tried to distract people from trying to do this. They spent about half their time trying to configure a proxy and not any time trying to configure their censorship settings, which they should be doing. With all these changes and with what we know, we wanted to measure how hard is it to connect to Tor if you are censored, and did our changes help? And we did this by looking at things like how many people could connect in various censorship environments, how long they took, and how many times they failed before doing that. And this time, we did want a representative average representation of how people use the interface. So we recruited a bunch of people, 124, without a pre-screening survey, and rented a room in a laboratory to test out all of the different censorship environments and our interfaces in parallel. As a result of recruiting around campus, although we tried to limit the number of students, a lot of our participants had higher education. So keep that in mind. Like the previous experiment, we put a bunch of people in the laboratory room, put them behind one of the censorship settings, show them that some websites were working and some of them were censored, put a copy of Tor Launcher, the old deployed one or the one with our changes, and told them to use Tor to circumvent censorship. People got different combinations of environment and interface combinations, and they were assigned to these at random. We then instrumented the interfaces to time our users, record system state, record interactions, and quantified how easy it is to connect to Tor. This isn't surprising, but we found out that if the censor is more comprehensive, it was harder for the users to connect to Tor. But exactly how much was a little bit of a surprise. The good news is that if the sensor is just blocking the websites or blocking the public relays, most people can make it through. It's just that when people are in those adversarial censorship environments, that they take a really long time to get there, and about half of them fail. And this was when they were highly motivated in a laboratory setting. So I suspect that these numbers are actually better than what is actually happening. Another thing that we learned was that our design changes did help users connect and save time, as you can see. And if you look at our paper, there was a statistically significant improvement in the amount of people that were able to connect to Tor, and we saved people a bunch of time. In the really comprehensive censorship environment, we saved them an average of 20 minutes. The third thing that we learned is that we should improve more than just the user interface. We found out that a lot of people spent time waiting for the connection to Bootstrap or for error messages. These people usually knew what they were doing, click connect, and just had to wait a couple minutes for a connection to be bootstrapped. These people made a bunch of mistakes, and these errors would never time out or time out after a couple minutes, and this would distract them, have them wait indefinitely, or give up. An example is configuring a syntactically valid but invalid proxy like 1.2.3.4.port 80. That would never error out, and they would just be stuck watching this progress bar shining, hoping that it would work, and nothing would happen. For additional details of what everyone did, when they connected, what they used, you can refer to our paper. But in conclusion, we recommend a thorough redesign of the interface. We hope that our changes were a proof of concept that design changes do make a huge impact and do help people connect to Tor. We don't recommend our design changes exactly because we didn't isolate all of our design changes and test them individually, and some of them might not actually have made a difference. But we do recommend an interface that does the following three things. The first thing it should do is to control the user flow with the consideration of censorship circumvention as a use case. Currently, Tor browser is aiming to get a lot of people to try direct connection right away, and that works for a lot of people who are using it for anonymity, for casual browsing, or if they just want some privacy. But it doesn't necessarily take into account some users that might not want to try direct connection, fail, and then have to try again, especially because error recovery is very difficult. A lot of times people failed and they kept trying to connect and not trying anything else. The second thing that the interface should do is to not mention Tor-specific concepts or require the user to know how censorship works. So these things are pretty bad. No one knew what they meant. Something else that I would suggest is to ask the users about what they do know about. They're the best at knowing things like what country they're in, are they using it for anonymity or censorship circumvention, and what's the level of risk that they're willing to take. Are they okay with us automating the process for them? Because we could do that maybe. The third thing that the interface should do is have better timeouts and error messages for error recovery. I suggest an error that is somewhat more descriptive than this, that the 62-year-old grandma can read, and specifically to give some advice on what to do after that error. Things like, please restart and try again, or pick a different bridge, or are you connected to the internet, are some things that could be very helpful. In summary, using Tor to circumvent censorship is hard, but we found out why, and we found ways to help users in those environments, and we know that we can help the users in those environments. I'm happy to say that I now work for Tor. This paper has gotten some funding money, and I'm personally excited about making all of these recommendations turn into a reality. Thank you.